the first week, and then Tom gave a guest lecture the week after. But this week I'll be teaching, and then I think Adrian will start teaching again some lectures next week as well. So just to catch up a little bit, I wanted to find out a bit more about each of you and what you wanted to get out of the course, because there's still some more material we can put in. So I guess I know you pretty well, Jonathan, and I know Mo a little bit well, but I don't know you very well at all, unfortunately. So maybe we can go around and each person talk a little bit about what they'd like to get out of the course, and then I'll talk about what you've done so far, and I've got some more lecture material for today as well. So how about for you, Jonathan? What's your...
Well, one of the main things that I'd like to get out of the course is obviously learn from under you and Tom about how to go about doing a research project and working with people.
Okay.
And probably making connections like I've already met more and Mary.
Okay.
So meeting people and probably cultures. So probably my main thing is, I noticed when I was working in teams, you have like a mix of different cultures and personalities, and you have to sort of and work in that environment.
Yeah. I'm just going to make some notes here. So for you, it seems like a lot about learning how to do research and meeting people like with Murray and Mo. And then teamwork as well. Is that a pretty good summary?
Yeah, pretty much teamwork. I have led teams and worked in the team environment, but there's been times when there was, say, someone who was clashing with 3 or 4 people, and you have to smooth it out.
Yeah, it's always difficult, isn't it? When it happens, yeah, great. How about for you, Murray? What's your... That sounds like you've been resurrected or something.
Yeah, or... started about this company Focus 360, which we have registered as. Started doing virtual tours for businesses. And of course, during that core period of time, I did the Red Zone, which we're quite aware of.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, the University of Canterbury's also got the architect program on the physics side.
Yeah.
I'm interested in filling those quite for company reasons, commercial reasons, developing those products further, taking them into taking them back to business. Because I know how the commercial world works, you've got to keep ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
Ahead of the game.
Yeah.
But I also love learning too.
Okay.
And I just saw that it's a reasonably perfect for where I wanted to go to increase my skill base too.
So it's about, for you, it's a little bit about learning skills that will help you with your own products and business. Yeah.
But also have that interest in pure research side of things.
Yeah.
I'd love to sit in my own home one day and put down some screens and sit in the middle of the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, be immersed inside the movie.
Yeah, immersed in technologies.
Oh, that sounds good. Sounds really good.
I'll be doing a thing, get me the adopted to the group there.
Oh, really?
And doing a gigapixel from there.
Wow.
Not from here at home to do that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Round shot. Round shots.
No, I haven't heard of them before, but yeah.
It's on a motor drive machine.
So it'll be a 360 gigapixel, will it?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So all I need is a big lens. I'll get one on the next week.
That sounds really awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. How about for you, Mo? What's your interests?
Mostly, I think the wearable technologies, how it can benefit the healthcare industry in particular. Yeah, and obviously learning new skills, just like everybody else here. And yeah, before I came here, I had that. Yeah, you get people from different backgrounds to come around. So coming from a software background, I want to see how the other parts as well are and learn from that. Yeah, and also meeting new people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry? Oh, I did too. That's weird, isn't it? Oh well, I don't think it'll affect the lecture too much today, but it's probably the bulb is probably on its last legs. So Yeah.
Yeah, and finally, yeah, I want to learn how research is done. Yeah.
Big list.
It's a good list, but it's great. So, Mo, obviously you come from a software engineering background, and I guess, Jonathan, you've had a lot of experience in coding and developing software as well.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So I wasn't quite sure, Murray, have you had much programming background or?
HTML.
Okay, so it's web design.
No, my way around pretty comfortably around those open source content systems.
Okay, great.
Websites also.
Okay, great.
PHP I can read, but I don't think I can write too much of it.
Okay, sure. Okay, so that's good to know, because in the class we're going to start talking about some tools for rapid prototyping and design work, and so it's good to know you've got different levels of experience with different types of tools, which is good. Oh, good. Okay, great, excellent. Cool. Okay. Well, so far, I guess you've had a week's worth of lectures, and so Adrian talked to you the first week of class, and my understanding, he was mostly talking to you about kind of interaction design process and a little bit about some prototyping. And then you also had classes from Gunn as well, and Christoph too, I guess. So that was more about the design side and the evaluation side, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. So let me pull up the slides for today. What we're going to just go back to my directory where they were. What we're going to do today is continue on with the talking about design, and there we go. There we go, this one here. Great. Excellent. Oops, I just have to turn off my messages, otherwise I'll get spammed with lots of messages the other day. Yeah. I've got a couple of papers for you to read too, though, and what I'd like you to do is to read them through today, and then we'll talk about them tomorrow. So we'll pass those out. There's 3 papers there, and these 3 papers here. Okay, you pass those on as well. So there are 2 papers that talk about prototyping, and there's also another thing I'd like you to read, but I'll show you. It's on the website, and so but for some reason I can't print it. I think they've locked the PDF file somehow so that it's not printable. So I'll show you on the website here. I should also mention that the slides that I'm using today, I haven't. The video here is from when we taught the course last year, so that'll be replaced with the new video. And the slides here will be. They're not the slides I'm showing you today, so I'll replace those as well. So this, I'd also like you to have a look at this article here, which is the an article about IDEO. So it's called the Business Week IDEO article. And this one, for some reason, I haven't been able to print. So you might need to read it online or download it and read it on. Maybe you can figure out how to print it. I think they've got some sort of permissions lock on it, so you can't print it. But this talks about the firm IDEO. And IDEO, has anybody heard of it before?
Yeah.
You've heard of IDEO? Okay, great. What have you heard about them?
I know they're into design stuffs, like, yeah. I started reading a book on Tim Brown, written by Tim Brown.
Oh, great. Excellent. Sorry? Yeah, that's right. So, so this is Tim Brown here on the left, and not a very good picture. And then on the right here is David Kelly. David Kelly was a professor at Stanford University, and about 20 years ago he founded IDEO with Tim Brown. And IDEO are one of the leading design firms in the world. So, you know, if you're a startup company and you've got lots of money and you want to pay somebody to help you design a great user experience, and you go and talk with them. So, and this is really not good with the projector. What did Gunn do yesterday? I guess black and white's okay. It's just the color images, isn't it?
He used
the only way we could get it to work is he got a different projector last week for Tom.
Oh, you put it on the disk.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this one works as well. So the laptop works fine.
Okay, great. Well, let's see how we go, and then so in this article, this page here is really important. It talks about the IDEO way, which is how you do design. So there's 5 steps that IDEO use. One is observation. The second one is brainstorming, and then rapid prototyping, then refining, and then implementation. And these are some of the same steps which Adrian's already started talking about. So the article talks about that and then gives some examples. So one example is, in this case, redesigning a store. So you can't see very well, but this is a clothing store, and they applied that process to redesign the store and make it look as a lingerie store. So previously there was just all this lingerie kind of all grouped together in an area, and it was very hard to find anything, and people kind of got lost in searching through it. So now they redesigned it to make it much easier and a much better experience. And then they give another example of shopping carts and of designing consumer electronics as well. So it'd be good to read that and get an idea of what their design process is like. Then these other 2 articles I've got. One of them called Prototyping for Tiny Fingers. It's quite old, it's in the mid-90s, but it talks about methods for doing rapid prototyping for mobile applications, and so that's when it says tiny fingers. Is that if you're doing a mobile application, if you have really tiny fingers, you can get the UI elements working. That's really helpful. So this talks about designing, in particular, for the UI on a device. And then this one here is a really good article, because what this talks about is how to design more around the whole user experience. And so what Adrian, I think, was talking about last week a little bit was how that technology, when you're designing technology, you can't necessarily consider it in isolation from what people are doing in their everyday life. For example, if you're designing a mobile app, then you've got to think about, are people going to use this while they're driving their car or while they're trying to do another task at the same time? And sometimes when people are designing those applications, they don't think about it in the context of use. So, for example, thinking about wearables and healthcare. If you're designing a wearable application in the healthcare, then you've got to think about, if doctors are going to use this, most probably they're going to be multitasking, or they're going to be doing rounds or whatever else, and how is that going to fit in with your everyday experience? So this talks about approaches, or how you can prototype for that type. So they give some examples here of I guess most of you are probably familiar with brainstorming. You've heard about brainstorming for making ideas. They talk here about the idea of body storming, where you act out scenarios rather than just brainstorming. Oftentimes you'll just write on pieces of paper your idea. But with body storming, you actually act out the idea to see if it makes sense or works. They talk about different ways you can communicate using prototypes, and how you can take fake systems and put them into the context they'll be using as well. So if you can read both those or 3 articles, then we'll talk about them tomorrow as well. So let's get on to some slides. So, boy, that's really interesting, isn't it? Did Gunn try plugging in the VGA adapter?
Yeah.
And that didn't work either, did it?
It changed it to magenta.
Okay.
Yeah.
From a different color from this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good idea. I've actually got a. I'll give some slides first of all, and then I've got a small design exercise I wanted to do in the middle of the lecture. So maybe when we do that, we'll break and we'll try and get the other. We'll get the. Yeah, that's a bit surprising, isn't it? Okay. So last week, hopefully, Adrian went with you through this interaction design process. So these 3 steps of discover, design, and evaluate. These pretty much follow what IDEO have got in their article there as well. And then when you're discovering what users' needs are, you've got to think about what they are. So Adrian would have given you the example of the supermarket. Did you go through that one? Where when you're designing technology for a shopping trolley?
Who are investing in?
Yeah, who's stakeholders? So in this case, for example, if you were designing a shopping trolley or some app that would help you navigate through the supermarket, then who are the users? And of course, the most obvious person is the customer. Now it's gone.
Oh, that's right. It's back now. Gun had to replace that white box with the VGA because it did the same thing it would cut out.
It's overheated, he said, I think.
And now it changes colour entirely. That's interesting. So let's plug it in again here and we'll see if we can get it to come back. Yeah, it just takes a minute and then okay. Let's try again here.
There was one story that Adrian tried to tell us, I think it was last week, something about toothbrushes. It was like a but he couldn't remember the story, so he said to ask you next time.
Yes, I can remember that. That's okay. So maybe I'll try and use what Gunn was using before. Yeah, let's plug this in. Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? And is it going to show anything, or is it just going to show magenta? Okay, so I plugged that in. There we go. Okay. Well, we'll deal with that in a minute. I'll show you a few slides and then we'll
Yeah, it does that, I think.
It'll come back in a second. Okay, great. So Adrian went through this process, and then people oftentimes think when they're building applications that everybody is going to be the user, but actually it's a little bit more different from that. So I think last week Adrian would have given the example of the supermarket, and if you're developing a technology for shopping, enhancing shopping in a supermarket, then who are the stakeholders? And most people would think that they're just the customers, if they're going to use the app on their phone or whatever. But there are other people around that as well that are also the stakeholders. So, the owners of the supermarket, the checkout operators, people who are putting things on the shelves, and people who work in the supermarket, different capabilities. So when you have to think about who the user are, you don't just think about who might actually be having the device in their hand, but everything else around that device. So with you again, Mo, with wearables for healthcare, you might want to be able to develop a great user experience for the doctor, but then you've also got to think about, well, it's going to be somebody in the hospital that's going to decide about whether this is going to be purchased or not, and so how that's a stakeholder as well. And then there's got to be people who've been developing the content that goes on the application. That's a stakeholder too. So there's a whole wide range of different stakeholders. He also would have talked about how it's important to consider the whole user. And did he give the example of the Nokia Engage phone where he holds it head inside the head. Yeah, that's kind of a funny example about. So you've got to think about not only whether a person can actually use the technology, their physical and cognitive, emotional needs, but also the social and cultural needs. And in the wearable space, this is what Google is wrestling a little bit now with the Google Glass project, in that the display is really wearable, but if you wear it out in public and people start laughing at you, or they don't allow you to go into a restaurant or a pub or something because you're wearing a display, then that may not meet your social and cultural needs. And I think the main thing Adrian talked about last week was personas as well. And so here's Gunter, one of the personas, and then here's another example persona here, Ginny, and how you have to write the motivations and things about that. And then once you've got the persona, you can put that persona into a scenario or a story as well. And so here's the story with Gunter going along. And that story helps inform the functionality that you might want to put into a application. And so in this case, this is a story about him using kind of an integrated projector to project images, and once you read the story, it tells you the different functionality the projector should have. So it needs to be able to dock with a PowerBook, for example. You need to be able to plug a tape into it and things like that. And so from the story, then it helps you define more about the functionality of the application or the experience. And then you can do things like, for example, this is a wireframing here where it shows how all the screens relate together in the application. I think the last thing Adrian would have talked about is prototyping. So two types of prototyping: the low fidelity, quick and dirty prototyping, and then the high fidelity, more final prototype, which lets people interact with technology. So, for example, a low fidelity prototype would be a paper prototype. So here you've got some paper that you've written menu options on, and then you pretend to push the menus and you show different options. And a high fidelity prototype would be something like this, which is a tethered prototype. So they're trying to prototype a digital camera. So they actually have everything running on an attached computer, but the output is shown on an LCD display that has similar form factor to the final camera. Okay, so that was not last, 2 weeks ago, I guess. Are there any questions about anything Adrian talked about in that sense? Great. Okay, well that's good. That's encouraging. That's good. Great.
You did mention cultural things, but as I said, he couldn't remember the example. He said there was a product that was brought in somewhere, and because the way the culture works, it didn't take long to actually find it.
And this is a toothbrush or toothpaste? Or toothpaste or?
It was a photo of like a Japanese woman, I think, in the bathroom, and then below it was like someone from a Western society using the electronic one.
That's a brush that's.
I'm not putting something anyway.
What's that?
Right. Australian twig.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's been lots of examples of people who have been advertising and different products. Sometimes the product names don't translate well into different countries. There was a car that was it Ford was trying to sell, and it was they call it the Punto or something, and in Spanish Punto means go slow. So they're trying to sell the car in Mexico, and nobody's buying it because the name means go slow. But in English it means something completely different. So yeah. But yeah, definitely you have to consider the cultural circumstances. So what we're going to talk about today then mostly is sketching and prototyping. And sketching is a way of doing very rapid prototyping. So there are a lot of benefits to rapid prototyping. First of all, it's very fast and expensive. Before you even start writing the first lines of code, it identifies problems before you've coded them up, and it gives you more and better feedback so you can start getting feedback from users right away. It helps you think creatively. It also gets everyone on the same page right early in the process, and it fosters teamwork and communication. So it's really important in the prototyping process or design process to have something to share with people very, very quickly. sometimes when people come from a engineering background, they often want to try and build something that actually works before they show it to people. But actually, it's very important to get something, even a rough sketch on a piece of paper that will enable you to start communicating about it. And this is part of this elaboration and reduction process. So when you go through a design process here, there's these kind of two funnels that you go through. The first funnel is the elaboration funnel, where you try and generate more and more different solutions and opportunities. So this is oftentimes in brainstorming, you try and generate lots and lots of ideas. And then you've got this reduction funnel, which is in many ways the opposite. The opposite is, in this case, what you're trying to do is filter the ideas down and pick the ones that are worth pursuing, and then produce some good quality decision making at the end. So when you're involved in design, you oftentimes have this tension between elaboration and reduction. And your ideas go through this kind of design funnel. So at the beginning, you've got the concept generation, and at the end, you want to have the final concept that you're going to work on. And then through this, you might go through several phases. So, the first step, you may try and generate some general concepts, and then you work on an exploratory phase, clarification phase, and finally a resolution phase down here. And in this case, the granularity, or how well formed your ideas are, changes. So at the beginning point, you just have very general ideas, and the final end point, you have these kind of fine scale ideas that are quite well developed. What you'll typically do is at the beginning you'll generate lots of concepts, you'll filter some of them down, and then some of the concepts you generated already will generate new concepts. So it's kind of this zigzag process where you get a big lot of ideas at the beginning, you filter them down, you get some new ideas, filter those down, until eventually at the end you've just got your few ideas you're working on. So the sketching process is really all about that. Sketching helps in the elaboration stage, whereas prototyping or producing high quality prototyping is more in the reduction decision making stage. So sketching is really all about design. It's not about trying to draw a very nice quality output, but it's more about providing a tool that can help you express your ideas and be part of this idea generation process. So, based on your own experience from sketching and drawing and looking at other sketches and things like that, why do you think it might be useful in the design process? Why do you think sketching might be useful? Any thoughts about that?
I've been building a cost-effective joint evidence system.
You've been building a what?
A website.
Oh, okay, sure.
Online.
Yeah.
It's actually up there.
Right.
But it's been exactly like that. I do something and get the territory manager around.
Yeah.
There's a lot we discussed with it, and it comes down a bit further. Should be finished tomorrow.
Oh, well done. Okay. So it's that same process I drew out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it saves you costs.
Yeah.
And also makes you prioritize the most useful functionalities or features that are needed by users.
It's also very fast to change.
Yeah.
So it's like if you, as you're drawing the idea, you might see something that has to be changed because you didn't take it into account. So sketch at about 4 or 5 different interfaces and be pressing assume to press buttons, and then you actually find a logic flaw or a problem. It's easier to sketch at a new interface than it is to more simple cost.
Yeah, it is very, very quick. That's true. It's really low cost. So here's a couple of ideas. So first of all, sketching is useful because it allows you to do early ideation. You can easily draw and sketch ideas that may take a long time to build if you're looking for real. It allows you to think through ideas. It also forces you to start thinking about how things might come together. So sometimes in your head you may have an idea of a product or some sort of user experience, but until you put it down on paper, it sometimes doesn't gel all together. So for example, Mario, you were talking about before about how one of your dreams is to sit in your bedroom and pull all the screens down and kind of have this kind of 360 movie or something. But until you kind of draw that on paper or start thinking about how it actually might be become real, then it doesn't really make you think of how to make it real. It's also a really good way to communicate ideas to other people, and it forms this very active brainstorming. So once you've got some sketching down, you can then have other people come and look at it, give you some feedback, just like with the St. John's person, give you more ideas and feedback as well. Bill Buxton, who's a very famous interface designer, he said that sketching is about activity, not the result. So the main activity is you've got some idea in your mind, you try and create something, and the sketch represents what you're creating. And then when you look at it, and that oftentimes gives you more ideas. And so he talks about how you have this kind of dialogue with the sketch. So the big caption is a sketch of dialogue with the sketch. So once you've got something on paper, then you might generate more ideas and more things as well. So I want to give you some examples of how people have used sketching in the past, and then we'll try a sketching exercise ourselves. So there are a lot of famous designers have used sketching in the past before. One of the most famous is Leonardo da Vinci. So he's very famous for producing lots and lots of sketchbooks of his different designs. And in some cases, many or most of his designs weren't actually built. Like he designed the early helicopter and designed early planes and fantastic war machines. But many of them were never built. But he still was able to convey his ideas to people through his sketchbooks. You can see other examples. So here's a sketchbook of what might be from an industrial designer. So in this case, he's designing some kind of wearable smartwatch, or so he's got some different ideas for how the watch might look on the list. Color helps. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then in your sketchbook, you may also have different idea variations. So it's hard to see this one, but this is sketching of different dialogue boxes that might pop up in the user interface. And here's design variations for different remote controls. And in fact, what the person's done in this case is they've taken the remote control case and they've broken the top of it and they've photocopied it. So you can see these four bottoms here are all the same. And then on top of that photocopy, they've sketched new ideas for the button layout. So they've obviously been asked to do a redesign of an existing remote control, and the manufacturer doesn't necessarily want to change the size of the remote control or maybe the bottom part of it. So they've got four of the same bottoms, but four different tops for button layouts. And sketching can also be used to show relationships and flows over time. So in this diagram here, it's hard to see, you can see some arrows going to points. So in this case, it's talking more about transitions as well. Here's another example of storyboard transitions. So this might be a website. When you click on different links, it might go to different pages on the website. So you can see start from here and it's over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it shows the flow through the website as you click. You can see the drawing's really, really crude and rough, but it's still enough that you can get a feel for what's going on. So let me run through a few different techniques, and then I thought we could try an exercise ourselves. And while we're doing that, I'll try and see if I can get the projector. So there's a number of different techniques that can be used when you do sketching. One of the first things to think about is you think about how much fidelity or realism do you really need. So you've got to think about do you, how much resolution is going to be in the image. You have to be consistent with the state of the development process. So if you're remember that design funnel I showed you before, if you're very early in the brainstorming or design process, then it's not consistent to show kind of photorealistic final product drawings. You want to be able to have a very rough drawing, and that also kind of signifies you're in the design process. Whereas if you're already late at the design process and you've got almost complete concepts, then you want to make sure that your sketches look very beautiful and they look like the final products. And similarly, you might want to be able to use sketching to suggest and explore rather than confirm where you're going, and also as a catalyst to both conversations and discussions. So here's an idea of different fidelities. So if you're doing a user interface, if you're kind of early in the design process and just want to get some rough ideas down, then probably it's going more towards the left-hand side of a low fidelity method. If you're about to deliver something to some coders to actually build the application for real, then it's probably more towards the right, where you've got font and everything's fixed and the button size and layout and like that. But you can see both of them convey the same information, but just with different types of fidelity. So one of the first techniques is to try and reduce everything to the bare essentials. So this is some sort of scribble drawing where you just try and sketch anywhere and do very speed sketching. And you just try and draw the essential elements of the interface and just use scribbles to suggest details. So for example, this might be a website. And you can see here, all the person's done is draw a very basic box and drawn some lines and some little buttons. And then they've added some text here to explain what those things really are. But there's just enough to hint at what the details are. Another technique is to use annotations. So you might take a sketch you've got already, or produce a sketch, and then on top of that, add another layer that explains what those parts of the sketch are. So this again might be a website here, and then in orange they've added these annotations that explain the different parts of the sketch. You can do it using tracing paper or as a Photoshop layer or over video. And then another technique is for annotation is to add textual notes. So here's a sketch of a bike frame. And around the bike frame there's been some notes or marks added to add more sketch elements to explain what the different details of the bike frame are and to list questions or issues about the design. Sometimes people want to highlight their object they're designing in the context of how it's being used. So one technique used for that is tracing, because that makes it very, very easy for you to create very nice looking sketches. So the basic idea of this is that you take a photograph and then you trace the elements of the existing interface or screen or user in the photograph, and then you can then produce traced results of that. So the drawing skill required for this is almost zero, just to trace out photographs, but it produces very useful designs at the end. So for example, here's how you might do some sketches of different gesture, interaction, or input methods. So you might take a photograph of the hand positions, sketch them all out, and then use those hand shapes in your interface. So here's the example here of tracing those hand shapes that I talked about before, placed in the context of using a system. People can also take photographs of the device being used in context. So here's a picture of a person with a tablet, a book, a poster, sitting at a table, and then here's all the sketches that we've made, or traces we've made from it as well. Sometimes people also use hybrid sketching. So this is useful when you want to mix low and high fidelity elements. So for example, if you're doing user interface for a mobile phone like here, then you're not going to be changing the physical form factor of the phone. So what you can do is you can take a photograph of the phone, but then you can sketch on the screen of the phone. And so the high fidelity parts are the fixed parts, and the low fidelity parts are the parts that you've designed. Similarly with the example I showed before with the remote control, where the person took a photocopy of the remote control base and then sketched on top of that. So then you have these hybrid sketches where you have this low fidelity part and high fidelity part blend together. And then sometimes you would add those those elements into real world scenes. So here's maybe a mock-up of what might be an application for train timetabling. So you've got a photograph of the train, and then into the photograph of the train you sketch in user interface of what might be there. Or here's other elements for using maybe something with a car or something with a workplace here as well. So you'll often come to see examples where people will take a photograph and then add sketched elements into the photograph that represent just the piece of data. Yeah, it looks really professional, it's really nice. When you've got sketching. In most cases, sketches just represent a single moment in time of how a person might be using an interface or what the interface might look like. So as you heard from last time with Adrian, what becomes really useful is to connect those together into more storyboards as well. So the problem with a single sketch is that it's quite hard to capture the dynamics of interaction over time, and it captures the user interface, but it doesn't capture behavior. So what a good sketch should do is should tell a story. So for example, here's a sketch about, I can't see that because but here's a sketch about a website, but it doesn't show how the person interacts with the website. In this case, they're talking about this website allows you to buy different products. So the solution to this is to use multiple sketches to show interaction over time, and to use the sketches as kind of keyframes in a storyboard or an animation. So it represents snapshots of different portions in time. So you can see here the user wants to select a stroller to buy. So here's the selecting the stroller, the cost there, and then they want to change the color of the stroller. So click on this one, that changes the color here. So it shows 3 points of interaction in time with the website. Of course, storyboarding is used a lot already in animation. So here's some storyboards from a movie, and they show the key moments in time. So in the same ways that people use storyboards to make films, you can use storyboards to tell people's interaction with technology over time. So here's an example of a storyboard that's used to talk about some sort of wrist-mounted wearable device that helps you locate your friends. So here's the device initially looking at their wrist, and there's some sort of GPS locations marked on that. And you can, when you hold the wrist perpendicular, it's got a camera or something, so it's showing your friend at distance, and then your friend. So it kind of shows you how you can use a device as well. When you're making storyboards like this, then what you can do is you can get inspiration from filmmaking. So, for example, the second screen here is a close-up of what's on the device, and this is more like an establishing shot down here, so it's a long-distance shot. So there's different techniques you can get from filmmaking. So having long shots to establish context, and then you have a medium shot to show the user, over the shoulders to show what the interface is like, and then close-ups to show different elements of the interface. So you've got to think about becoming like a movie director to make storyboards. The other important thing about storyboards is the transitions. So what you want to show is with storyboarding is how the interface transitions between different states. So here's some examples of transitions. And you can use examples from comics or other print media for how those transitions could be made. In this case, it's an arrow that's been drawn that shows the person's diving into the swimming pool. So you can see him standing there, and then you can see him in water, and they've drawn this arrow to show that he dived in, and then he's swimming, and there's another arrow direction he's swimming as well. Then this leads also to transition diagrams. So you may have a whole set of sketches or from the storyboards, but you may want to join them together to show how you can transition from different interface options. So here's maybe a mobile interface on your phone, and if you check maybe the top option there, you're going to go down this branch. You check the middle option, you go down this branch, the bottom option, you go down this branch, and then you can sketch out the whole transition diagram. So when you're creating a transition diagram like that, the key is to focus on the key interaction steps and think about the branch points and how people can branch out from different transitions. And then for each of the transition points, sketch the screen and label what triggers that transition and where you're going to go from that point. So you can see here they've got underneath each of those screens, they show the context of that screen and the context of all the transitions as well. So here's another example of state transitions. So that gives you a very brief, high-level overview of sketching. There's some more resources that you can use, and these two books in particular are really valuable. This book from Bill Buxton called Sketching User Experience, and from Saul Greenberg, which is the workbook that goes with this one as well. And what I'm going to do is on the website, I'll provide a link. In fact, this workbook here has a whole set of PowerPoint slides with it. So I can show you a couple. And we don't have time to go through all of them, but what I'll do is I'll provide a link to the websites for those books and also slides. So those who want to get more detail. This is actually a very rich topic, and for example, at the University of Waikato, one of my friends teaches a whole class on user interface designs, and all they do is sketch for 12 weeks basically. But so here's the PowerPoints that go with the sketch book, and they talk about things, for example, like this one here talks about how to create animated sequences here. So just zip through this very quickly. So here it talks about how to make animated sequences. Use sequences of images to create animations. Go back, for example. So here's all the sketching they've done. These sketches are more high fidelity, so they've. So let's go to the sequence here, and there's a problem, and we'll see if you can figure out the problem. So here's a user interface for choosing clothes. A rental shop, I guess it is. So here's the first thing to do, here's the clothes. It's what's been chosen. So here's the gloves. So as you check each one, it puts the total in the bottom. Jacket. Check out. Rental gloves and jacket. Go to the counter to pay $8. So, did you notice any problems with that?
The only thing I spotted was the arrow being on the second diagram. I think it was out of place.
So this one here?
And no, previous one.
That one. Okay. I don't know. So maybe it's a ski. It's a ski shop on the snow, and you can
There's a functionality problem here that should be checked out.
Oh, let's see what they say.
Choose clothes. So we choose clothes. Click the boxes to choose clothes.
Oh, if you go back to the first one.
Oh, the hats. They don't
Is that
add
the
up.
size or?
No, let's see if we can figure it out. So it says the issue.
It's
here
the dollars.
is when the frame elements do not align. So I guess that relates to a little bit what you were saying before about the arrows not lining up. So changing frame 1 to frame 2, the two images are not aligned.
Wow.
You get this. If you go back again, I guess you'll see it.
Yeah, I'll see what you're doing.
So you'll see that the frame's not aligned there.
I don't like the idea of it's about the third slide there.
So this one, so it's frame 1 and 2. So here's frame 1, and you see the buttons there. And when you go to frame 2, the buttons move. The point hasn't moved. It looks like it's moved because the frame alignment is different. So anyway, so that's one example of what they do there, and they talk about how you can fix that as well. And then there's another problem, which was the cursor jumping around. So I won't go through all those, but I'll put links to those. So if those who are interested, you can go back and look through this about 15 or so PowerPoints that talk about, and these go in parallel with the sketching workbook that I was showing you. Here, sketching book here. So what I thought we could do is take a break for about 5 or 10 minutes. And what I'd like each of you to do is have a go at sketching interface for yourself. And in particular, you'll notice on the hallway down here, we have this name board where we've got the names of everybody in the lab and in fact your photos and stuff there as well. But that doesn't have much functionality, you know, it just shows the picture and that's about it. It has a camera, it has a sensor in the picture frame so that when somebody's not standing in front of the picture frame, it sometimes goes into a sleep mode and turns off. But it doesn't show very much functionality. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that we've got a touch screen on that picture frame and how we could enhance that with some touch interaction. So it might be that you touch somebody's face to find out more information about them. It might be that you are able to not only show people's faces but also show projects that are going on in the lab and you can touch the projects as well. So I brought some paper here and let's take a few pages of paper. You might want to go down and have a look at the photo board again to look at it. And then I also brought there's some pens here as well. And remember what I told about having very rough, quick, crude prototypes. So you could grab a few pens from here and then sketch very quickly and roughly what functionality you'd like to add to the photo board to enhance it, to make it more useful. And we'll spend about 10 minutes on that. And while I'm doing that, I'll go and try and figure out the projector issue, and then we'll gather back at about 11:05, and we can talk about what you guys have done. So, great. So grab some pens, and then you might want to look at the photo board again to remind yourself what it looks like, and then sketch away. Hey Lee, so we have an issue with the projector there. Did Gunn tell you about that before? Oh, come and have a look, and you can see.
That's great.
It is. So in fact, this is running off the VGA converter here. When I plug the other converter in, it stopped working. So that wasn't so good.
Did you try the black one?
I'll try that next. The black one didn't work at all, but maybe it'll work this time. So if I plug this one in, it was so this is showing like a magenta background. This one showed. Let me see if it works now. Okay, so it's working fine now. Before it was showing a kind of an orangey background.
Okay, I just need to be here. Thank you.
Maybe that's the case. So yeah, so that's looking great now. Well, I haven't done anything yet. I just plugged this in. So.
Oh, yeah, I think that gets
Overheated,
and then it goes away again.
That's weird. It wasn't doing that
It has a
before.
little grill on the back. So maybe I could just put it up that way.
Okay. Great. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm not sure why this is. You know why that would be showing green?
I'm not sure. It doesn't really give me any input or output about why I'd be doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. No idea, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I'll look into it later when you get something.
Sure. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. So just sketch as fast as you can. So there's no. The good thing about sketching is that it's not so much about showing a polished presentation. It's just about to briefly, quickly capture your ideas. I'll be back in just a minute. Have a seat, and you can catch the last half an hour. Fun. So let's let me give you the papers that we've been talking about. What I'd like you to do is to read those for tomorrow, and then there's also another paper on the website that on Learn that I couldn't print out for some reason. Oh, don't worry about the drawing stuff. These guys are just about to finish up, so you can see what they've done. So let's stop, and then let's have a recap of what you did. Just for your benefit, Robin, what we're doing is we'll be talking about sketching today and the sketching user interfaces. And so what I asked you to do was to look at the photo board that's over there with people's faces and sketch out some ideas about how they could be enhanced. So I've been doing that for like about 5 minutes. So just a very quick dirty. So let's go through and see what ideas you guys have had, and then sure. You can leave your pens here if you want. So why don't we start with Moa? Maybe you can just hold up your sketches and then say and describe what you're thinking about.
Does it block the camera? So based on the current display, the way it looks like, so you have pictures of different people within, inside the lab, and with the touch screen, what you can do is you can click on a person's picture, and once you do that, it takes you to the page with general information about the person, with their name, their title, their room number, and more information about them. And then at the bottom here, you have some links to projects that the person has been involved with, the papers they've published, their personal websites, and other links. Okay. So if you go and click on the papers, for instance, then it will take you to a page with a list of all the papers they've worked on before. And then on this side, you have a sort of scroll bar that you can use to scroll down to the bottom to see more information. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Okay. So that's a nice little interaction flow. That's great. Good. So how about for you, Murray? What was your ideas?
Oh, well, I started with a bit of like that.
Okay. I can hold it up. Okay. So you can receive it.
Title across the top. This
Okay.
is the home page.
Yep.
Pop-up list menu, home button, bottom right-hand corner.
So when you touch the screen, this pop-up menu will appear?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
It's functionally possible. I've done it before.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sure.
One of the menu items take you to the staff. One is about the facility and one is contacts.
Uh-huh.
Then you can touch those.
Okay. So this is
Now the other screen.
going to so the staff shows the current staff. The about shows material from the website.
Yeah, and the home button is in the bottom right corner. Oh, and you put the list menu in there. I forgot about that again.
Okay, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So what's this one showing here?
Contact details of the HITLab.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah,
right.
That's about it.
Okay.
And maybe if it's possible, a print function or a brochure on contact details if they needed it.
So you can hit it and it will print somewhere.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Okay. How about for you, Jonathan? What have you been? You made 2 pages with. Very fast.
Yeah, what I did was, I did the original layout as before, so you see the photos.
Yeah.
And then as the person selects one, I then did about 4 different interface layers that you could do. So this is just my thinking process, so this is the one I would do. But
so these are 4 different options, are they?
Oh no, well 4 different variations of the interface. As I did the first one, I changed my mind and then changed. But when I originally thought was that when you select, you could have like about, and then at the very top you could have the selected student or person you picked, and then the other options left and right, and the current project you're working on, and you could leave them a note if they were in or out, like your phone number, because it's touchscreen, and then you'd have a map to where they were. And then I decided to change it to show sort of about them, and then you could highlight red or green around their photo, whether they're in or out, because you could log it with the card. The network that's currently involved in the project, so you can see the other students or the other people involved, and then again about and so on. But the final one I sort of settled on was kind of like this node layout, which is you'd have the person that you'd selected, they'd be highlighted in green or red, then it would show a node network or link off to the project, so you could select which project. that you wanted to see they were involved with, and then that would show off and link to the different users involved. Then from the photo you'd have the about page, then you'd have a link to the current project details, as well as a map showing where they were. You could leave a note, and then you could also have a button showing to go back to sort of.
Okay. Great. So, Robin?
I think I thought of something, maybe like an index slider that lets you slide on, that does a little search. So you could slide it to K, and then it would show you
for
the
the
K.
names?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And then you could switch that between.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, definitely.
That was a good
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Museum on the touchscreen TV.
Right, okay, sure.
They're organised by date.
Mhm.
First thing you brings up the date.
Right.
Particular location.
So you can see how with the sketching well, first of all, it's a great way for you to communicate all your ideas, and then once you've started doing sketching, you can see that helps you inform some of the functionality that you've got. For example, in your case, you want to be able to have hot menu functionality, and what we just showed Jonathan, you've got a search, so you've got a text input functionality, so you can send messages, and so it helps you then to go from original concept in your idea in mind to what's now from the design as well. So there's some important differences. Oops. Work, or is it just not going to work? Okay. Let's play this. Same little.
Overheated again.
The light has gone off. So the light's gone on. Let's see.
So it's USB powered, is it?
How about USB? It's not showing it's gone off. Light's gone off. Okay. Let's go back to our other approach and see if that's still showing. Yeah, I'm not sure why this is having that heating problem. I didn't have that before, so. No, great. Well, we'll just be on that. Try and fix it.
Did you want to give Robin the?
Oh, I gave Robin. Yeah. So, there's a important. It's frozen as well. It's showing the screen. Let's see what it is. Okay, that's more promising. So, so there's an important difference between sketching versus building prototypes. And what we're going to talk now is about how we can start thinking about the prototyping process. So with sketching, it's more about kind of exploring interface ideas or inviting, suggesting, or provoking conversation. Whereas with prototyping, it's more about refining those ideas and answering some questions as well. So you remember I had this kind of design funnel before, where you go from sketching at one end, and then the other end is more about prototyping. And so sketching is really all about the early ideation phase. So prototyping is more about capturing and detailing the actual design. So one of the questions is how can we build and test things much faster? So the core idea is to try and take the same ease that you've got with sketching
and bring it into the prototyping phase as well. You know, if you were to, some of the ideas you've got there as far as the photo board goes, it may take many days to program some of those ideas up. But you know, is there ways we can make that happen really quickly without you having to do lots of HTML coding or Java or anything? And you can see some examples of how this is done in producing different types of products. So, for example, here's the Nintendo Wii, and here's the change in design that they went through in building the Wii. So initially they had some very rough sketches, and then they made 3D sketches of them, and they made more polished sketching ideas. Then they actually built some physical prototypes. So here's a range of physical prototypes. You know, this one here with the button and the star in the middle is kind of interesting, very different from what the Wii controller looks like today. Here's another prototype. Here's a prototype with the kind of twists as well. There's a whole series of prototypes that went through in designing the handheld input device and the nunchuck device you hold as well. Another example is the Google Glass. So I've got one of the Google Glasses here in the HITLab we've had. I think most of you have had a chance to try this from other. So this is obviously a very hot item right now, but it's interesting to think about the prototype we went through to build this. There's a really great video that Tom Chi produced that talks about prototyping for the Google Glass. With Google Glass, of course, the idea is that you wear this and you see an image that's floating in space in front of you that gives you the impression that the text is overlaid on the real world. So that's a very different way of interacting with computers right now. So how long do you think it would have taken to prototype that idea? If you were, if you had the idea that you want to be able to walk around and see information always in front of your face?
Obviously, it won't take very long.
Okay, like a month or so, or a year?
No, not a year. Maybe quickly these days.
Do definitely. How about you, John? Do you have any idea about how long it would have taken to prototype something like that?
I know you do research to see existing solutions, and there has been stuff done like that before.
Right.
But I guess to actually design the idea and not infringing someone's like patents and existing stuff. But I guess once you have the initial idea and you sketch it out, you could do basic ideas within a few days, and then you just have to research the technology and how to implement it.
Yeah. Well, I've got this video from Tom Chi. This is Tom Chi here. And I'll show you the video. This is a TED talk he gave actually that's quite inspirational. It's quite a long video. It's about 8 minutes or 7 minutes long. But he talks about prototyping that went into Google Glass, and particularly in 3 areas. So one area was the display, and so being able to prototype having the display. Secondly, once you've got display there, you've got to think about how you're going to interact with it. And one idea that they had was being able to use gestures, so you can, a little bit like the Minority Report interface from Tom Cruise, so you can wave your hands in space in front of you. And then the third thing that they prototyped was how to get the weight and the form factor of the device correct. So I'll show you the video, and you can see that. Let me just go back to the here it's in lecture. Yeah. That one. It's here, but actually, let's see. I think it's loaded up. I'm sorry, I should have loaded that before. Got it in my here. Scroll down. See it. Okay. I know there's another place I've got it too, so just cool.
Tell us how long prototype.
He does. He shows the whole thing.
Oh, so you were asking how long it takes to prototype but not design it?
Yeah.
Bring the model out too.
Well, it depends. You can spend. Depends on your pocket, really. I know, like, some companies can only afford, say, 3 or 4 months of user testing because apparently you can never remove all bugs from the system.
Yeah. No, you can't. So it takes a long time sometimes.
It's down to how much you might willing to spend, really. You went away for several months, though, didn't you, Mark?
Yeah, I would spend time at Google for a while.
I know they announced it. When did they announce it? They actually come out today?
Oh, it was actually a 3-year process from. So they've been working on the project for 3 years now. Just sorry, I think I had it before on this other link.
It was down there.
Here it is. Well, that's a
Well, that's a
JPEG.
JPEG, so that's not the right one.
It's the guys who did undergone the first graphical interface for Stereo Mount. They spent 10 or 12 years, I think, doing user testing.
Wow.
Earlier on, you had. I thought it was the one in week 4. You said it was
Sorry.
in week 4.
I think it was that one.
How long ago?
Lecture 4 rather.
Before the Apple Mac graphic interface, I think it was. So it failed, but they were trying to break away from the command line thing.
Sorry, let me just see if I can find it.
Sorry? I'm grateful for that. Yeah, so they died because it was too expensive.
I'm
And
gonna stream it
as
through
far
the
as
music.
The product just failed, but apparently then Mac and Windows harvested them.
Education.
Apparently it's not always the best idea to
Yeah.
be the first person in.
Okay. So play this. So this was just basically get an idea for what how the power of
My name is
prototyping.
Sanjay. I spent 2 years of my life building the user experience team for the Google X division. And it's a place I affectionately call the Department of Science Fiction because of the futuristic nature of the types of projects we took on. Self-driving cars, glass, and other things that you'll see soon enough. So for those who haven't heard of this project, this is what Google Glass looks like. It allows you to overlay digital things into your eyesight while still maintaining being part of the world. So if I, were to pull out my cell phone and look into it, I'm basically out of this world now. Like I'm in my own little cell phone, tablet world, what have you. But Google Glass has the vision of allowing us to continue to be in the world, but also have access to the digital things that we need. Now, I'm going to ask you a really simple question about Google Glass. How would you prototype this experience? How long do you think it would take you to make the first working version of the heads-up display? Okay, a little bit on the long side. The answer is 1 day. And here's what it looked like. So basically, the magic piece is the coat hanger. The coat hanger, invented in a specific shape, and the top loop goes around your neck, and the bottom loop rests against your chest. It allows me to carry a piece of plexiglass on which a little sheet protector. So these are the things that you put your book reports in so they don't get wet. Literally got it in the drugstore. Have it out at the end of the plexiglass, and then it gets projected onto the pipe projector that's connected to the netbook. And using this setup, within 1 day, we were already able to start having the experience of what it looks like to have digital things overlaid on your physical world, be able to move around with it, and also use the netbook to try out tons and tons of different ideas around software. Now, after you start getting something like that working, a really important problem comes up. Like, you're wearing this thing on your head. It's like a pair of glasses. So you don't have a mouse or a keyboard or a touch screen, all the ways that you're used to interacting with the machine. So we thought for a second, well, maybe we could do something like what was shown in Minority Report. So for folks who haven't seen that, basically Tom Cruise is manipulating software with his hands in front of his face, and photos are flying over here, and his emails in over here, and so on and so forth. So that's the same question again. How long do you think it would take to have the real experience of doing something like that? 2 years, okay. Somebody had said one day, 45 minutes. So here's how it looks. So you wear the thing that we saw the first time because you need some way to go project things. But what happens is we got 2 hairbands, which I think is the hardest part. We had to ask people for their hairbands. But you put one hand in each hairband, and attached to that hairband, we tied a fishing line. And the fishing line goes over the top of the whiteboard and then goes down to this little assembly that's taped to the floor. And what this means is every time I move my hand in any direction, it adds tension to the line, and it does the falling with the assembly on the floor. So the other end of the fishing wire is attached to a chopstick. And it's not because I'm Asian, there's just a cafeteria nearby. I don't just carry chopsticks on me. But I tied it to the end of a chopstick, I clipped it into a binder clip, and then put it over a pen. And basically what happens then is when you move your arm and it produces tension on the wire, the chopstick comes down like a lever and clicks the presentation clicker. One hand moves the presentation forward, the other hand moves the presentation backwards. So this was built in 45 minutes, and that meant shortly afterwards, we're having experiences like looking at an image gallery and saying, next image, previous image. Or looking at our emails and saying, let me click into this email. Let me click reply now. And this was exactly the experience of what it was like to go control software with your hands. And ultimately, what it taught us is we probably shouldn't have this in the product. We learned a lot of things about the social awkwardness of it and some of the ergonomic aspects of it that you couldn't have figured out ahead of just thinking about it. And ergo, the second prototyping rule, which is doing is the best kind of thinking. They teach you to think a lot in school, but I think it's a little bit overrated. Now, last example, actually Google's not the first team that's tried to go make something like this. And if you search for heads-up display, you get tons of images of teams that have built various systems like this. But I can tell you at a glance that none of these pieces of hardware are comfortable to wear for more than 15 minutes, except for maybe the helmet over there. But then you gotta wear a helmet. So, how would you go figure out a way to go wear something like this comfortably? The answer is really basic materials. Modeling wire, paper, clay, and using something like this is able to make something that looked like a pair of glasses really quickly. I cut out pieces of clay that weighed exactly the same amount as the electronic components that we were talking about putting on the device. Wrapped it in paper so you didn't get clay on your face, and then taped it to the modeling wire in various places to go experiment with how a pair of glasses can fit on you. And we discovered something really important then. Like, if you look at this drawing on the bottom, it turns out that the weight of a pair of glasses is actually mostly perceived through how much weight is on your nose. And it also turns out that your ears can carry a lot more weight than your nose. And that's a totally different experiment. You can ask me about that. But because of that fact, if you put weight behind your ears, it allows your ear to go act like the fulcrum of a lever. And it then takes weight off of your nose out the front. And actually, you guys can try this now. You put glasses, if you push very gently on the back of your glasses, you'll find actually your glasses feel tremendously lighter. Now, this meant that we not only discovered something interesting about how to go, that's useful for developing a device like this, we actually discovered something pretty fundamental that had never been discovered about glasses, period. So if you have really heavy glasses, you can do this and you will be more comfortable. Now, the last point I want to make is about 2 types of learning, because through the process of rapid prototyping, you're able to learn very, very, very quickly. It's a very specific type of learning. The type of learning that you usually learn in school, I call book learning. It comes from what humanity already knows, and it's a necessary foundation for you guys to go and explore the world. But there's a totally different type of learning, which I call expansive learning. And this is the learning that you do on behalf of humanity. Right? You are creating something new. You are expanding into the possibilities, and you're building that sphere of human knowledge in that process. And we think about these things, and as soon as you hear, the infinite realm of possibilities beyond the sphere of human knowledge, you might be thinking, well, there's the scientist, at the Large Hadron Collider who have these amazing instruments. That's their job, right? But the truth is that this action is available to all of us. You know, it's not just for the scientist, it's also for the poet or the songwriter that expresses an emotion for the first time in a unique way. It's also for the person that has an amazing business idea that they're certain can help millions of lives. And it's the realm of using paper, clay, and tape in order to go find a new insight in ancient technology. So now that you guys know about rapid prototyping, I'm excited to see what you do with it. Thank you.
Great. So that's a very interesting video that showed that they were able, with rapid prototyping, to produce some quite quick prototypes they could test as well. So you can see here. Okay. So this is some of what I was talking about before. So you can see this picture here shows the first screen they had, where they had the coat hanger kind of around your neck with a small plastic folder on it, and then they had a little projector, Pico projector, projected onto the image there, so that he could walk around and get a feeling for what it's like to have an image floating in space in front of him. Then using that they developed many prototypes in over the next 3 years, and went to what we have today with Google Glass as well. So you can see that you've got your sketching interface that you've been sketching, and then what you can do is you can start building more refined prototypes off of that. So, for example, what some people do is they'll take sketch pieces of paper and they'll put them on top of mobile phones, mobile devices, to see what it feels like to have the paper in their hand as well. And one of the good things to do is to avoid producing high fidelity prototypes very early on, but focus on getting the low fidelity and low level prototypes working well, so you can convey the interface concepts clearly. So when people build high fidelity prototypes, oftentimes they tend to waste time on small details that really aren't important in the overall concept design. So this talks about some materials and methods of doing low fidelity prototypes. We've talked before about sketching already, so often people use paper, or like what you guys just done, post-it notes, glue and sticking things. They'll design interfaces like this one here. This is taken from the article I gave you, the prototype of tiny fingers. They'll develop pull-down menus or pop-up menus. So here's a user interface for ESP calendar tool. When you select an option, that can pop up and provide your menu there. There's also some software tools you can use as well, and we'll talk more about those tomorrow. But one of them is this tool called Balsamic, and Balsamic is a tool that allows you to build a user interface wireframes very, very quickly. When you build them, they will then turn into interactive objects that you can then actually poke with and interact with on the web. So with Balsamic, you can lay out the interface you want, and then you can actually put the different policies if you want onto that. So in applying these ideas, the basic approach is not to start with code and don't start with Photoshop, but start with some piece of paper and sketching really, really quickly, and then fail fast and rapidly iterate to eventually get to the design solution metrics. So, for example, with Google Glass, they were able to, in an hour or so, prototype the idea of gesture input with Glass, and then within that day or two, quickly come up with the idea that that wasn't going to work because of the
inconvenience of waving your hands in front of your face all the time. So the last thing I want to talk about today before we break, and we've gone on a bit longer, but probably because of the problems with the projector, is to give you a little case study about how you can apply these into a project. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some other prototyping tools you can use, and I'll give you an assignment for next week so you can try some of the tools. So just refresh your memory again, we're going to follow this design, prototype, evaluate kind of cycle. And the project I'm going to talk about is a project that was done for a final year project from a student, Sharon Brosnan, in Ireland in a digital media design course. And what she was developing was a project for the Bunratty Folk Park. So Bunratty Folk Park is an outdoor museum in Ireland, and where they've collected about 20 or 30 buildings that are from 1 to 200 years old, that show how people used to live in Ireland in the 19th and 18th centuries. So, and it's in the grounds of this castle. So people typically go to the park, but don't really oftentimes get much information about the buildings. So she had the idea that she wanted to use augmented reality in some ways. So people could walk around the park, they could point their phone or their camera at a particular project, a building, and then get some overlay onto it as well. So it will also serve as a navigation aid as well. So the first part of this was to design for the visitor and think about what people really wanted. So in this case, she was thinking that people really want to be able to have a navigation aid that let them navigate through the park very easily. It also let them had a good user interface that would engage the user some way as well. So to understand the users more, what she did is she did some background literature searching. So she looked at how people had developed similar mobile applications for other museum settings. And then she also tried to understand the user over time. So she went to the park and observed what people did and also talked to people as well. And what she found was that most people that they already had a paper map they could get. Most people didn't get the map, but most of the visitors did have mobile phones. And mostly they wanted more information. They wanted to be able to view the park at their own pace. And a lot of people were also very social, so they'd go and visit the park in groups. So, based upon what she'd gained from the users, then she wanted to go through this interaction design cycle here of defining what the goals were, defining some functionalities, developing personas, develop scenarios, and drawing up some storyboards. And so the functionality she thought about was looking at how you could have different view options on the device. So you could view through the camera, through a map or a list. You have different sub-options. And there's other different features of augmented reality, so being able to overlay 3D objects or some 3D tours. So then she went and produced a storyboard. So she wasn't a very good drawer, so you can really see what she's got here. But she made this story about how people would go to the park, and then the second slide shows somebody downloading the app. You go and look at the, you go to the location of the castle. They pull up the app there. You can see the screen of the app. They can look at the castle and see a visual annotation on the castle, and they touch it, get some more information as well. Then another case was when they could actually play a game at different locations, and then multiple choice games, they could pick the answers, or they could interact with virtual characters. So that was the rough storyboarding. Then from that, she decided to do both low fidelity and high fidelity prototyping, and this is part of now the design process. So the low fidelity prototyping was involved with sketching and her prototyping, and the high fidelity prototyping was using the existing Wikitude application on the mobile phone. So I should point out when she was doing this, she wasn't a programmer herself, so she couldn't actually do any programming. So she just wanted to look at the design process. So she made some initial sketches. So here's some of the sketches she used. In this case, she was just using a simple layout tool to design some sketches here. She made some post-it notes. So in prototyping, so she made some sketching, and then she put post-it notes on them, and she asked people to select menu options. When they did that, then it would go to a second post-it note as well. And then finally, she produced a PowerPoint prototype. So with PowerPoint, you can link different slides, different spots on the screen. So with this way, she could then do some interactive sketching. And so she had a 3D blob there that represented 3D overlay. She had different web that. And when she got to this point, her design was now good enough that you could do some simple user testing. So people could sit with the PowerPoint prototype, they could push different buttons and give feedback about what they're doing.
using what's called a talk aloud technique. People talk about what they're trying to do. Then, based on this, she went and built a Wikitude prototype. I'm not sure how many are familiar with Wikitude, but it's a simple augmented reality browser that runs on your mobile phone. And you can build your own content without knowing any programming at all. So you just kind of drag and drop content. So with this, she was able to build an augmented reality experience that put some tags in place as well. And then again, get some user testing done with this as well. Now, one of the disadvantages with Wikitude is that you have to use their user interface. So the interface she's got here is quite different from what she designed initially from the PowerPoint. So then she used the learning from the augmented reality, and then she combined that into a final prototype. And the final prototype was designed like this. So it's got a very different user interface, but it's very clean and easy to use. And then to show the final piece of work, she actually made a video because she couldn't program it up. So she made a video prototype, and we'll talk more about those tomorrow. So that's going kind of through the whole process. So you can see how she started with talking to people, and then she went to some very, very crude storyboards, and then went from that to doing some paper designs and layouts, PowerPoint, then finally something that would work on Wikitude, and then the final design was this video that she did, which I used from interface as well. So what we're going to do tomorrow is I'll talk about some tools you can use for doing prototyping like this, and then I'll give you a small assignment where you can try and do something like this over the next week or so. Then we'll build on this over the coming weeks in terms of providing more material about prototyping as well. So does any of you have any questions?
Was this a research project? If it was, what was the initial research question?
Her project was so it was an undergraduate final year project, and it certainly was a research project. The research was really about, the question was about how you could use augmented reality to better inform the visitors to the Bunratty Park. So how could you use it in outdoor museum setting? But she was a design student, so she basically was coming at it from a design perspective. Yeah. So her overall thesis talks about going through this whole design cycle, and I just kind of skimmed across the top, which actually made many more steps as well. Oh, and at each point she did different user evaluation. So when she had the PowerPoint presentation working, when she had the post-it notes working, she could get some feedback from users then, and when she had the PowerPoint presentation working, she could get a study feedback then as well. She also got feedback from people from the augmented reality version they'd done, and then also from the final video that she did as well. So she had, so her research was really about how to use the interaction design process to inform the design of a mobile device, a mobile application that could navigating and providing content in the outdoor setting. So does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about today so far? Right, okay. Well, so I'll give a lecture tomorrow, and in this case, I'd like you to read overnight or today the articles, and we'll talk about them tomorrow morning. And then I'll give you some more examples of how to prototype quickly, and then I'll give you a small prototyping assignment that'll be due the following week. And I guess today you had to hand in your persona assignment that
It's already due.
yes, it was due today.
Oh, right.
So yeah, so if you haven't done it, you should try and do it now or the rest of today.
No, it's done.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Friday.
No, it's supposed to be uploaded today. So
That will be uploaded today.
yeah, that's fine. That's great. That's good. Great. Good. Any questions or anything? And as I said, the slides on the website aren't these slides yet, but I'll upload them later this afternoon.
Okay.
So yeah, we haven't gone through and deleted the slides from the website from last year yet, so we're progressively doing that. So these slides are a little bit different from what's on the website. Great. Okay. Good. Well, thanks for coming. And I guess it's time for lunch now. So, and one of you is supposed to turn off the video. Is that right?